Hi guys, hope you're doing well. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about AI and the effect I think it's has had and is going to have on people in general, but particularly how it will affect autistic people such as myself. So unless you've been not watching the news or going on social media at all in a long time, you'll be aware that people are becoming increasingly concerned about AI's implications for causing unemployment and essentially just replacing more and more occupations, more and more tasks that other people do. So kind of my personal opinion on that is, in itself, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Just like, during the Industrial Revolution, growing technology and stuff, that kind of meant that basically it went from a majority of the population having to slave away in fields in the hot sun for hours every day to only about 2% of the population actually works in agriculture, and because machines do so much of the heavy lifting and stuff, and so that's improved quality of life, and of course it's improved production of stuff. And so in itself I don't think AI is a bad thing, and because you can kind of compare that example of just general technological growth in the past and replacing people's jobs to what's happening now, right? So it means more things are being automated essentially, and that means people should have to do less things and people's quality of life should improve because there's more technology. But unfortunately, that's quite a naive outlook. I kind of understand now. And really, that's just very naive, because what's happening now is actually you're getting these extremely rich people who have the means to have AI technology and stuff, people at the tops of companies and stuff, and they're just laying off loads of people or just not hiring new people and just automating all these things and just keeping all the surplus that produces for themselves. And I don't want to get into too much into politics, economic theory, but that is already causing serious problems. You're seeing in most Western countries that for various reasons, not just because of AI, but partly because of that, I believe. It's becoming much harder to get a job. Even people without any social impediments are still having to apply sometimes for hundreds of jobs before they get a job. And really, most people I know, if they get a new job, it's through nepotism. It's through it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? And it's even the fact that if someone does get a job just by applying for it online, that's actually a remarkable achievement, even if it's not a particularly good job. That is something worth congratulating them, worth them being really happy with themselves about getting, as they're really lucky to get that nowadays. I remember seeing a statistic the other day. It was in the UK. I'm going to kind of elaborate on this, but there was something 17,000 new graduation jobs every year and over 1 million graduates from university at the moment, which is there's one job for every 600, at least one kind of job that's a graduate level job for every new, at least for every 600 new people with a degree. And so for me, if you've been following me for a long time, you'll know that I've mentioned that I studied a STEM degree, and I've also like learned a few languages, and I think I've done quite a good job at that. And at the time, like back in the early 2010s, when I was sort of like in early adolescence, kind of just thinking about like going to uni and stuff, and like just study maxing, and people were talking to me about it, and yeah, people kind of like recommended, like my family and stuff, and just society in general seemed to just recommend doing a STEM degree, because that's what that's how you get a job. If you do a sociology degree, you won't get a job, right? And so it seemed like the smart option, right? And learn some languages as well, because that was also a very marketable skill at the time. And now I've got, and now it's like languages and like STEM stuff, like anything to do with like computing or whatever, that's been almost totally taken over by AI, because a computer can do that stuff so easily. And it's worth kind of mentioning that, or just like bringing up the fact that like when autistic people have like special interests, or like I do, when they're like useful ones, or traditionally like useful ones, they tend to be, things like something in the arts or in STEM, right? And also autistic people's deficits tend to be in things like involving social and practical skills, like, doing stuff with my hands, like, building stuff or moving stuff, or, just generally like communicating with people and things like that. And those are exactly the things that AI cannot do, at least not yet. Whereas like art and STEM, I mean, those are the things that AI can do, because it used to be like, for a while, people were like, a few years ago, people were sort of like, oh yeah, AI will be able to take up most of the STEMmy jobs, most of those kind of white collar STEM jobs. So you guys are like screwed, but the artists will be okay because a machine can't make art. Well, actually, it seems like it can, right? I mean, let me ask, have you ever listened to an AI song? If you don't know, you probably have, because AI is like somehow, and you just haven't noticed, because they are almost indistinguishably good. And I think one thing that people use to cope about this kind of stuff is that they'll like show examples of like ChatGPT, like really like messing up something, but like ChatGPT is like, that's like the free version, that's like the old version, that's like the PlayStation 1, of AI now. And it's perhaps even it's like deliberately nerfed, because like the general public, the people who make this AI stuff, they don't want the general public to have access, at least not free access to actually, the extent of their, of what they have, for obvious reasons, right? Because then they'll keep all the power. And so I think people are really underestimating the effect of AI, right? And so I mean, I don't want to get too much into the politics of this, but like, if we're getting this increasingly rising unemployment, and at the same time, we're getting like you're getting like politicians and stuff, just like really like, I guess pretty much like threatening and criticizing people, who have struggled to find a job, like there's something in the US, right, where like they passed this act where like people are gonna like, it's gonna be harder for people to get medical care if they aren't like working or whatever, right, which is like, it's really bad timing with the rise of AI taking over so many jobs, right? So, yeah, it is extremely concerning. And of course, this stuff, this disproportionately affects autistic people. I mean, I don't need to remind you by now, but, across most Western countries, like the full-time employment rate for autistic people is 15%, right? and part-time is about 29-30%, at least that's in the UK, and it's similar in other countries of like similar economic status and structure and whatever. And so, yeah, like, and of course of that minority, of that cohort of autistic people do have a job, like lots of that is in, you know, like the said fields, like they're like, you know, in the arts, so like, you know, do music or drawing or something, or they are stem cells, you know, like they do computer programming or whatever, and that's being eaten up so quickly right now. So this statistic, I think, is just going to get even worse. And of course, all the other statistics, like, you know, the prevalence of homelessness and, you know, like mental health problems. I mean, it's like 90% of, like, I'm pulling that out my ass, but, you know, it's like a majority of autistic people have some form of mental health problem. Like, that's just going to get even worse now. And you are going to hear of more people unaliving themselves and stuff. And so, yeah, I know that the rise of AI thing is going to affect 99% of people. You know, maybe not some blue collar workers, you know, like people like that didn't, like one of the people who like started the AI, who like the godfather of AI or whatever. I can't remember his name. On a podcast, he said, you know, the advice he would give to, like, you know, like children nowadays is like learn to be a plumber, because that's like going to be like the last job that goes, pretty much. But like not everyone can be a plumber, you know. You need maybe like 1 in 1,000 people to be a plumber. What's everyone else going to do? You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think there's some serious societal changes underway right now. And, yeah, it's not just me. It seems so difficult for even like people, even like neurotypicals to get to like get and keep decent jobs right now. And, you know, one thing that's really annoying is the people who like gave me advice, or, you know, kind of like encouraged me to like pursue like a STEM subject when I was you know, younger, and learn languages and stuff. It's like now they're kind of like, now, you know, if I'm like considering like going back to do a postgraduate program or something, they're kind of saying like, oh, well, you know, you should check if there are any jobs first. But it's like, you know, there are very few, you know, like almost every like technical field is being affected by this right now. And it's pretty much impossible to predict in a year's time, right? Because the shortest course you could do is like a year, basically, right? In a year's time, like, you know, the sort of the demand could just totally invert again, right? So, yeah, because of AI progress and whatever, right? So it's extremely difficult to make a decision like that. And yeah, people might say that I'm just, you know, saying this just to like look for excuses, like, you know, to like, I don't know, not make a decision or whatever, but of like, you know, what I want to do like in the future. And I think, you know, if I did go back to uni to train for something technical, it would only be like for fun. It would have to just be for fun, because there would be no guarantee of a job at the end. You know, like I'm like, if neurotypicals are struggling, and like, you know, it doesn't matter how like book smart you are, because AI is a million times smarter than me. You know, it's like, you know, when people say like, oh, well, you know, when it's like people can look up to those who are like really good with like mental arithmetic, for example. Like that's a very obvious example where like mental arithmetic it's almost obsolete. Like I'm pretty good at it. You know, I can do calculations in my head quite fast. Not as fast as like Rain Man, but you know, it's like still like even like Rain Man level arithmetic. You know, a computer could beat him hands down. And so it's like that is a totally obsolete skill now. Like, and people say, oh yeah, but what if you're like stuck in the wilderness and you don't have like a calculator with you? It's like nowadays that's an extremely like rare and unlikely scenario to happen, and doesn't reflect daily reality. So, yeah, it does kind of suck that those skills are becoming increasingly obsolete, and it's not just about like the economic, like financial implications of there being no like employment prospects for people like that. And of course, I think this is maybe like the growth of technology has already made it more difficult for autistic people to get jobs, right? Like older autistic people seem to find it easier to get jobs because they got their jobs in the 70s or 80s maybe, and they're not the best jobs, but they're still like more than still more than being a NEET or borderline NEET or whatever, right? But like it is very concerning, and it's not just the economic and financial aspects, because it's like even like within itself, like it does affect like my self-worth. It's like I said, sure, like people can kind of like still like admire me and be proud of me for like being smart of some ways, and I can feel good about myself a bit for that, but that does get very diminished when it's like anyone can just like or at least like anyone who matters can just like use some technology that is smarter than me in every way, right? I know people kind of say like, oh yeah, but AI isn't like the same as a human, it will never be the same as a human, but like they can never really explain why. Like you've got the Turing test and you've got the Chinese room experiment, and if you don't know what they are, go look them up, but none of them actually really prove that AI it passes the Turing test, right? But like the Chinese room experiment doesn't prove that AI is capable of something that a human is. It doesn't really do that. People think it does, but it doesn't. And also people just like, people think there's something that means that AI, that like there are things that humans can do that AI can't do, that makes humans like somehow like like emotionally or intellectually or psychologically special. And maybe because I'm autistic I can't see that, but I just can't understand that how that works. Like, and I guess that's because I do lean towards a materialistic perspective. I don't, I do believe that consciousness is I'm not 100% sure, but like just Occam's razor, I guess, makes me believe that consciousness is just a subjective perception as a result of the complexity of the human brain. And everything could be conscious, nothing could be conscious. I don't know, right? But from what I can see, like everything in AI and in humans can both be explained for from a materialistic perspective, and that just kind of makes me feel not special, really, and it's not nice. And I guess this is true for everyone, but I feel like for autistic people, like, we're kind of like almost a nickname almost is like robots, right? Sometimes. And, it's like, it's almost kind of feels like, am I just like a really shitty version of AI, that like, that like has to eat and shit and piss, like, and maybe there is something that neurotypicals have that I don't, that distinguishes them from AI. But I can't see that in me, really. Like, I of course have emotions and stuff like that, but I kind of understand those emotions, like, logically, and everything is just, like, to me, is just input and output. And I don't know, is that just my black and white thinking from my autism, and I got a mental block on another perspective? But if someone could really try and explain that to me, that would be great. I've tried to like talk to people about it before, and I just, no one's really convinced me otherwise. So that's kind of how I feel about myself sometimes. I'm just a shitty version of AI that has to eat and piss and shit, like, that's basically it. And I mean, it makes me feel pretty bad. It doesn't make me feel like awful, because like, I don't know, You know, it's like, I guess we're yet to kind of face the full implications of AI, and I do worry that, you know, the powers that be are using it and are going to continue to use it to control us and subdue us and make us suffer and obey and so on, right? And I'm very fearful, and I think people really need to try and like look at AI as, it's dangerous, and not because of AI itself, but because of humans who are using it, right? And it's taking over industries and stuff, and you really got to think about, okay, like what is society going to look like? Are we going to have like UBI? You know, are we going to like, you know, be more understanding for people who are struggling with careers and stuff like that as a result of the way modern society is? I really hope that happens, and but yeah, those are pretty much my thoughts on AI and how I think it's affecting people like me. Let me know if you have any more questions on this, and I will talk to you again soon. All right, bye.